Hi, I'm attorney Casey Hoyer. Today I want to talk about spanking. And I don't want to get into good parenting practices. It seems like every parent has a pretty strong opinion about spanking. And I'm not even going to talk about my own parenting practices at all. I know that King Solomon thought that if you spare the rod, you spoil the child. I know other parents subscribe to rearing their children with a fishing rod. The focus of this is really to address child abuse in the setting of criminal court and in family court, whether or not a child protective order should be issued in a case. In the criminal setting, a parent will be charged with child abuse if the spanking involved, and we're talking about spanking in this case, caused physical injury to the child. That could be an abrasion, that could be bruising, and whether or not a parent is charged anywhere from a Class C misdemeanor up to a second-degree felony will largely depend on the seriousness of the injury to the child and whether or not the parent inflicted this injury in an intentional way, was reckless, or just negligent. There is a defense for parents in the case of being charged with child abuse in criminal court, and that is if the spanking itself was involved reasonable and necessary force. Now, that's a difficult question to answer. There are some factors the courts have considered that kind of apply really to both criminal and civil court. One is, whether or not they were using this spanking or force to protect the child, for example. Whether or not a belt or other object was involved. Now, in the case of a child protective order, and that's of course in the civil setting, we see a lot of those in divorces or in a paternity situation where the parents are not married, but they have a child together. And so, yes, can they be weaponized? Of course. But sometimes they're justified, and sometimes they're the reason that parties are getting a divorce. So for a child protective order, and I've talked a lot about child protective orders at other times, you generally have to show that there was a physical injury to the child. And again, that would be a bruise, an abrasion, cut of some kind, or that the child is in imminent danger of being abused. So sometimes people ask, is it okay to use a belt? Or, hey, I used a belt in this case, am I going to be charged with child abuse? Or is the other parent going to get a child protective order? Really hard question to answer. For a time, actually, prior to 2017, the Court of Appeals said yes, that is child abuse if you use a belt or some other object at all. They made it kind of what we call a per se rule, where it's just automatic. If this discipline, the spanking, involved a belt, that would be child abuse. Well, the Supreme Court took that case up, and I think they really have a kind of a common sense approach to this, and said, looking at the statutes and the previous case law, and said that spanking with a belt by itself or some other object is not per se child abuse unless it causes harm, physical injury or something to the child. There has to be evidence of that. Now, I always kind of give my best practice advice, and that is, and of course attorneys are always risk adverse anyways, but I always tell clients, listen, especially in a divorce or you've got you've been divorced, don't use a belt. That's not a judgment about best parenting practices. That's just a attorney advice, because the court sometimes will just fall on the side of caution, and you're going to get different judges who were brought up differently, who parented differently. It's a very fact-sensitive analysis, and I would probably caution parents against using a belt in particular. Spanking, whole different matter. If it doesn't involve injury, if it wasn't done maliciously, if there was a need for it, you're protecting the child, they ran out in the middle of the street, it's, you know, a non-verbal child or something, young child, in those cases, the court probably won't issue a child protective order, or the screen prosecutor probably won't bring charges for child abuse. But sometimes, unfortunately, in today's age, it's better to be safe than sorry. Thanks for listening. Hope you learned something.